Welcome to the Awakened Human Podcast, the place to be for highly progressive yet extremely grounded intuitive guidance, energetic support, metaphysical tools, and higher consciousness for highly successful, ambitious, soul-centered visionaries and leaders like you who want to make a global impact and achieve your highest fulfillment by aligning with your soul's true divine agenda and your role in God's source creators, the divine's plan for lighted creation, and by utilizing your divine gifts, talents, and abilities from the higher realms. We do this by working with the non-physical realms of higher guidance, energy, intuition, and powerful metaphysical tools for healing and transformation. We understand that the real change and transformation that's being called for on planet Earth and in our own lives and our own businesses doesn't come from outside of us, and it doesn't come from the top or from the bottom, but rather from within. And that the change that we desire to experience in our lives and in our world requires us to change from the inside. I'm your host, Lori Ann Spagna. I'm a best-selling author, spiritual catalyst, intuitive, energy worker, ascension guide, multidimensional channel, animal communicator, visionary, lightworker, and luminary. I have dedicated my entire professional life to helping thousands and thousands of humans and animals all over the world in service and contribution to the light, which is the expansion, the upliftment, the evolution of humanity, to awaken, to uplift, and to align with our true divine source, which exists within each and every one of us. It is my passion, joy, and purpose to share this information, energy, and consciousness with you. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing time with me. Let's get started. Well, welcome, everyone. It's Lori with you here. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here, and thanks for being here. I am taking a few moments out to do this recording today, knowing that I don't have my microphone with me, so I'm hoping my amazing podcast editor can do a great job with the sound, in spite of the fact that I'm not using a microphone at the moment. So I apologize if the sound isn't the best it could be. I wanted to take a few moments today to speak a little bit about being a better version of you. And I wanted to help offer some support and insight on this concept of being a better version of you. I think we're at a crossroads for humanity right now. As many of you may know, some people call it ascension, but it's also just an energetic shifting from an old way of being and operating in the old paradigm, which is primarily based in I, me, mine, which I also will call narcissism, me, the me culture that really is the history of Earth and humanity, and shifting into a new paradigm that is based more in us, we, ours, and where we start to change fundamentally from within us, from the inside of us. In other words, who we are, how we operate, how we choose to behave, who we choose to be, based on more conscious and deliberate, intentional ways of being and behaving. In so doing and making those shifts, we're becoming a better version of ourselves. And I think that a lot of people on this journey, they don't really understand when they're being asked to change for the better, and they hold on to their old ways. And when people attempt to hold on to their old ways of being or behaving, the holding on typically causes and contributes to discomfort and unpleasantness. And when people attempt to hold on to an old way and sort of refuse to change or to grow or to transform, the displeasantness, the unpleasantness tends to ripple out and affect others in their field. And it'll hold people back. It'll hold other people back. And it'll make the shifting from old to new paradigm typically more difficult. Now, if you're a person who has the capacity, and a lot of people don't, but if you're the person who has the capacity for inner reflection Inner reflection's not an easy thing. You have to be willing to look at your own self. You have to be willing to look at who you are, flaws and all. And you have to be willing to see what is commonly called your shadow aspects. Now, most people don't want to do that. But in order to make the changes within you that are required to shift from old paradigm, me, fear-based reality, living in fear and carrying wounded parts like neediness and entitlement and false arrogance, which is always based in extreme inferiority, and righteousness and rightness, right and wrongness, argument and debate, all these old ways of behaving. In order to make the changes where you're more liberated and freed from those ways of being, one must be able to do deep inner reflection. What most humans do, rather than being willing to reflect, most humans don't know how to inner reflect. They really don't. Let me give you the most basic thing about inner reflection. You must be willing to take 100% responsibility for your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your beliefs, and the totality of your experience. Now, you can't take responsibility for someone else because we're still playing in the game of duality, even in New Paradigm. And so someone else has their free will and their thoughts and their beliefs and their emotions and their behaviors and their actions, and they are responsible for their experiences. But you can take 100% responsibility for your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own emotions, your own beliefs, your own belief systems, your own point of view, your own perspectives, your own experiences, which includes how you perceive things. That is not easy for people because the way the old paradigm has trained us is to blame it on someone else and to make someone else responsible. And so if that's what you're doing, then you are not able, you certainly are not able or willing, probably, to do the deep inner reflection, which is truly required for your change and transformation. But here's the thing. As long as you're not willing to change, which requires you to do inner reflection, which also requires you to take responsibility for what is yours to take responsibility for. In the absence of the willingness to do that, you are stuck in the old paradigm. And what happens when you're stuck in the old paradigm is that you will experience degrees of unhappiness, lots of fear, anxiety, worry, doubt, lack, limitation, not enoughness, not good enough, not worthy enough, not enough money, not enough happiness, not enough joy, not enough success, not enoughness, and all other forms of dis-ease and discomfort. And these things, you'll experience degrees of guilt and shame and regret. You'll experience degrees of isolation and loneliness. You'll experience degrees of sickness and illness. You'll experience degrees of restrictions on your freedom. You'll experience greater and greater degrees of restrictions on your rights, including your right to think and believe freely, whether you realize it or not. And I'm saying this but it's because if you are a person who is unwilling to do the deep inner reflection, and you will experience degrees of great challenge, and the challenges will generally escalate and become more intense in your life. And that's when you start to feel like you're on some kind of roller coaster, highs and lows. This is what happens for people who are unwilling to change. They are unwilling to take responsibility. They are unwilling to do the inner reflection, and they default to their old paradigm way of blaming another. Let's use a better word for blame in this case is projection. They project their fears onto another. They may project their victimhood onto another. For example, a victim will blame another for being a bully, or a victim will blame another for being somehow doing something wrong to them. All right. Or they could have a false sense of entitlement. And in that case, they will make demands, unreasonable demands. They may be a bully themselves, in which case, if they're running that bully and they're unwilling to change, they will not see it in themselves that they're being overly pushy or perhaps unreasonable. Another example of how someone might be unwilling to change is an example where somebody is attached to rightness and wrongness, and they can only see perhaps the wrongness of a situation or a circumstance because they are unwilling to expand their perspective to see another's perspective. See, and so in that case, they are projecting their perspective onto another. And this is like they're making a hypothesis, in a sense, that their way is the right way, that they're right and another is wrong, another way or another viewpoint, because they can't necessarily see the other viewpoint. Why? Because they are unwilling or unable to take responsibility for their own thoughts and own feelings, and they don't know necessarily how to self-evaluate, how to self-reflect. And this keeps people stuck. And they cannot then become a better version of themselves. You cannot become a better version of yourself unless you are willing, really willing, to self-reflect, to take responsibility for your own self, for your own feelings and thoughts, emotions and beliefs. And when you do that, it's the hard look in the mirror. This is when we say we're willing to look at the shadow, because we're willing to see the side of us, ourselves, that doesn't always look pretty, that isn't always perfect, that isn't always right, that may be behaving as a wounded child, that may be behaving as a rebel teenager, or an archetypical pattern that we learned as a behavior that's really not really serving us, or that won't really truly serve us in terms of becoming a better version of ourselves. So if we're unable to self-reflect and to consider these things, we cannot become a better version of ourselves. We cannot self-reflect. If we don't self-reflect, if we don't understand how to self-reflect, then we can't become a better version of ourselves. It's not a magic wand. That's one of the things that's always very funny to me, because I'm a healer and I work with energy. And to me, healing is not something that is reserved for the physical body, although it certainly can be used for physical health issues. Healing is something we do to prevent physical health issues, ideally, right? Because once something becomes so dense that it causes physical health issues, it means that it is energy that was unresolved before it got so dense that it caused a physical dis-ease. So as a healer, I'm always attempting to resolve things for people in the non-physical, which is the root of everything anyway, and to address it from there. So in order to really make the change, there is healing required on the mental, on the emotional, on the energetic, on the spiritual, on the auric, on the multidimensional levels and layers of who we are. But in order for that healing to take place, one must be willing to take responsibility and be willing to see and perceive what it is that needs to be resolved, at least to some degree. You don't have to see the whole picture of it, but you have to have enough to say, I realize there is some form of dis-ease, dysfunction, something keeping me stuck, something keeping me in some form of lack or limitation, something in my way of behaving that is not allowing me to move forward, to become the best me, the best version of me, which, by the way, is always growing and evolving, because that's what it means to become the best version of you. There's not an end destination. It's a process unfolding. It's a process you're revealing to yourself on your journey of evolution out of the old paradigm of way of being and behaving, thinking and perceiving, feeling and emoting, and into a new way of behaving, a new paradigm of thinking, feeling, believing, perceiving. This new paradigm based in us, we, ours requires and mandates that one must be able to see beyond the me, my point of view only. One must be willing to see beyond me, my point of view only. One must be willing to expand and recognize that there are other perspectives and energies beyond their own limitation. So this requires the self-reflection. And again, self-reflection, it's not always fun to say, wow, I can see my shadow here. I can see how my behavior was perhaps harmful or detrimental to another, or I can see how my limited way of thinking or believing in some situation or scenario might have caused me or another some form of pain or discomfort or dis-ease that really wasn't necessarily serving. Or I can see how maybe there was a wounded part of me thinking I wasn't going to get enough love, enough attention, enough kindness, enough support, enough coaching, enough mentorship, enough. It's never going to be enough. Like I can see how maybe that was operating in me. I can see how maybe I wasn't welcoming or kind or inclusive to others. But that is not easy. And it's not easy for people in this reality. I could do a whole podcast on this as well, to say sorry, to be humble, and to say, wow, I'm so sorry. This is what forgiveness work is oftentimes about. Because very often the person we need to apologize to most is our own self for keeping us stuck or limited or blocked in the first place, right? This is what it is. When we're becoming a better version of ourselves, we have to be willing to take 100% responsibility and to stop reflecting and projecting who we are and what we perceive onto other people or even onto the external world. Because when we reflect onto the external world, we are disempowering ourselves. We are giving away our power to take 100% responsibility so that we can become the best version of ourselves, a better self. Yeah, I've been working on this with people, with myself, and with other people for well over 20 years now. I mean, I've lost track. And way before that, if you start counting pre-professional. And I've noticed over time how much resistance there is to somebody just humbly saying, wow, I can see what my role was. I can see what my part was in this. Or I can see how I've been projecting what I feel or my wounded aspects onto another. That's not easy for people. Because in that old paradigm, we've been made so wrong. Humanity has been made so wrong. And if you're made so wrong, it gets quite challenging to take that deep, hard look in the mirror and do the inner reflection and be willing to see those parts. But what I can say is after over 20 years of doing this work, the payoff is so good because here's the payoff. The payoff is that you become a person who is acutely aware of who you are versus who others are. Acutely aware. This is what's happened to me. Everything I perceived in another was a reflection of myself. I took 100% responsibility for things that weren't even mine to take responsibility for necessarily. By the way, people with 6 in their life path in numerology, this is very common, especially if there's a 6 and an 11, which I have both of those in multiple places. So taking responsibility was easy for me. And I did that to such an extreme in my own healing journey that now I can identify all those things in other people. That's part of what makes me so psychic, because I can see so clearly what the energies are that are there, what's mine, what's not mine, because I've done that inner work. And so one of the payoffs, besides really becoming acutely aware of who you are versus who someone else is in the experience of duality, right? Because ultimately we are all reflections of one source. We are all aspects of one source in different individualized forms and representations. When you do this deep inner work, you get very clear who you are versus who anything else is. The self-identity grows stronger, actually, and you are freed and liberated from those things that were so painful, harmful, and detrimental. And it becomes much easier to pick yourself up and dust yourself off when things like that sort of tend to bring you down, or when you come into the space with someone who's not necessarily doing that, or when you're interacting in situations or circumstances or environments where that's not going on. In other words, where someone or something is not, let's call it, cleaned up of that form of density. I hope this is making sense. Overall, what I want to convey here is that the payoff for doing the inner work is huge. You are basically you get freed up and liberated from various forms of pain and suffering. You suffer a lot less. You are much more clear about who you are, what you're doing, how you're serving, where you're moving, what direction you're going in, etc. And this applies to your life, your business, your relationships, your money, the whole thing. Plus, to top it all off, your psychic gifts start really exponentially growing, because now you're starting to realize all this stuff, it's just energy, and you can clear it out of your field. And you start learning more and more what's in your field organically and what's not in your field. And then when you're interacting with others, it becomes even easier. That's just energetics in the field. But another person could be easily identifying through those energetics. So if there's an energy in the field of, let's say, dishonor or disrespect, and you know that it is your natural nature to be honoring and respectful, and that's how you maybe feel in the presence of another, it's because that's the energy that person perhaps has brought into the field and is somehow or some way playing out, right? This is just an example. But you're through the process of taking 100% responsibility and doing the inner self-reflection and healing and resolving those, what we call shadow aspects, those parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily want to flaunt to the world, or we don't necessarily even want to see ourselves, or perhaps we don't necessarily like about ourselves and would rather not admit. For example, those kinds of things. By doing that inner work, you get freed and liberated from it. Your life and the quality of your life, your business, your work, your relationships, etc., improves. You get extremely clear about who you are and who everything else is. And your psychic gifts, your intuitive gifts, they all start coming online very clearly over time. It's not a pill. I say that all the time. It's not a pill. It's not a magic pill. It's not a magic wand, but it is an inevitable result. And the payoff is always rewarding because it just keeps getting better. Each time you do some form of healing or clearing, you're more and more liberated. And through the experience of this liberation, because you're taking responsibility for what's yours, what's in your field, you're doing the inner reflective work, the self-reflective work of what shows up, then you resolve that. Then what happens is you really are by default becoming the best version of yourself. You're seeing it along the way in yourself. You're recognizing the change in yourself because you can see, sense, and feel how you are changing. You can see, sense, and feel the results of your work, the fruits of your own labor. Now, in order to do this self-reflection, it is important to master some very specific tools. And while I don't have a ton of time to go into the depth of all of them, and this is part of the work we do inside of the Sacred Mentorship, one of the tools you must master is gratitude. Gratitude is so important. The reason gratitude is so important is not just so you can get more, but because it opens the energetic floodgates. It allows for the goodness, so to speak, of what is possible and potential for you to be revealed. And it literally stops or interferes in a way with the lack, the limitations, the blockages. I have watched and witnessed many times over the years, even in my own circles, where I observe lack of gratitude and I think and notice, wow, I don't enjoy that person or that experience as much because there's a missing of gratitude there. There's just not that exchange. Right? You start to notice that, right? So gratitude is a requirement. It's a basic foundational requirement. It's not something you do just because it's popular and trendy. It's because it is an energy that literally opens doors, energetic doors, opens and widens potentials to greater and better potentials and possibilities. The energy of gratitude is like doors opening, and the doors that open through the energetic keys of the expression of gratitude, the sharing of gratitude, and the energy of gratitude allows for better and more that is like or greater to the energy of gratitude. Okay, that makes sense. One of the other requirements of doing inner reflection is the willingness to ask one's own self, what is my role here? What is my role? What did I do? What did I create? How did I contribute to this? What was my part? These are self-reflective questions that are required and needed for both the positive and for the so-called negative. They're just two sides of a coin. But the positive, the things we desire, we're really letting ourselves take credit in a sense and acknowledge and recognize. And we ask, what was my role? How did I create this? What was my part in this? And then when we talk about like a shadow side or something that's less desirable, what was my role in creating this? How did I contribute to this? How might I have caused this? What was I thinking? What was I believing? What misconceptions might I have had? What perspectives was I carrying or believing or perceiving that led to this, that contributed to this, that caused it, that co-created it? It meaning the experience, the situation, or the circumstance. One must be able to be reflective. The other thing one must cultivate is empathy. Empathy. Because if one cannot say, wow, that person involved in this situation or that situation or circumstance, let's just use it as a person moment, was doing their best. They did not have deliberate intent to cause harm. Sometimes people do. Sometimes people do. And maybe that's the case. If that is the case, you need to be able to see that too. But the empathy is the willingness to recognize that person is in some way, shape, or form either doing the best that they can, trying the best that they can, has good intentions, or has some reason, even if their reason is their own wounded traumas. This is the ability to cultivate and develop empathy, the willingness to recognize that whatever or however the situation, the circumstance, there is other reason involved, especially when there are multiple, two or more free-willed participants, by having empathy. And we're not taught that in our society, but it is a requirement if one wants to shift into new paradigm. This is part of taking 100% responsibility. This is part of doing the deep dives, the inner reflection, the willingness to look at self, being accountable. This is what we're talking about, being accountable. And the other part about it is the willingness to recognize that in truth, there is nothing that really can hurt you through this exploration, because in fact, the truth of who you are is that you are consciousness, is that you are love, is that you are the energetic vibratory state of energy, and that all energy can be transmuted into something better. So through the working with energy, and resolving whatever energetics are in your field, through this inner reflection, through self-accountability, we resolve those issues. And then by resolving those issues or that energy, the better version of ourselves is revealed. We are in process, in a sense, of revealing the better version of ourselves and becoming the better version of ourselves. This is what's required, is that self-reflection, that accountability, that willingness to take responsibility, and the willingness to cultivate the energy of gratitude, to really, rather than focusing, it's not about focusing on what's wrong, it's about focusing on what's right. Choosing to be grateful for what's right and all experiences, even those that are causing or contributing to struggle, because through those experiences, we grow, we evolve, we become the better version of ourselves, especially if we're willing to work with them rather than pretend or carpet sweep. And of course, the development of empathy, which is a kind of consideration. It is a kind of heart-centered caring and willingness to look outside of our own limiting perspectives and our own limiting points of view, and to recognize that there are many other points of view, perspectives, and experiences that are equally valid and relevant. And what is the word I'm looking for? Important, that matter. That not just our perspective is the only one there is. In so doing, we get to become a better version of ourselves. We get to become more open-hearted, more loving, more caring, more empathetic, more intuitive, more service-oriented, more joyful, more loving, more kind, and more of all of the good things that we all truly do desire in the world. And we discover it and reveal it from within ourselves through our own willingness to change. That is the requirement. That is the requirement. As I record this podcast, and it may take some time to get to you before you actually hear it, but we are in an eclipse season. So even if when you're hearing this, it's not actually an eclipse season, I would like to suggest to you that eclipse seasons bring on heightened opportunities for transformation and change. So be willing to do the inner transformation. You will become a better version of you. Be willing to do the self-reflection. Be willing to take responsibility. Be willing to recognize the parts of you that maybe are not the best version of you, so that you can resolve those things and free and liberate yourself from the pain of those things, from the density, from the old paradigm way of being plugged in because of those things. And let yourself reveal to yourself a better version of you. That is one infinitely more magnificent. And that is the higher truth of who you are. A magnificent, brilliant, spectacular, phenomenal you. Because that is the truth of who you are. A more loving, fabulous you, where that's how you get to identify. All right, beautifuls, I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm going to sign off for now, and until next time, I'm sending you my most benevolent best wishes and my infinite love. Okay, farewell for now. Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening today. If you loved the show and if you benefited in any way, if it helped you to up-level or expand your consciousness, if you gained any new insights or ideas, if it made you think or become more aware, or if there were some strategies or intuition that you may have benefited from in any way, would you please do me two easy and simple favors? First, if you would be willing to leave a review, it would mean the world to me. I'd be so grateful. And second, if you're willing to share this show with anyone else who would benefit, you can either post it on your social media or just email it to someone and share it with another person or any other people. It would be so awesome. This kind of thing is so helpful in expanding consciousness on the planet and helping others to benefit from this kind of teaching, which just simply isn't generally readily available in the mainstream. So sharing it really helps others benefit and helps our planet evolve and awaken. Plus, expressing gratitude and generosity in this way will also expand your capacity to give and receive even more. Either way, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for participating and for sharing, and overall, just for being the magnificent, the spectacular, the brilliant, the fabulous, the wonderful you that you truly are, and for allowing yourself to be the very best version of you today and every day. All my love and gratitude to you.